Hi, my name is Herb Montgomery,
And I'm Alicia Johnston.
and we're just talking. For those of you who are used to tuning in and seeing myself and Todd, Alicia is our guest for the next couple episodes, for the next 3 episodes, I think. And I'm really excited about that. Alicia Johnston is an old friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time. She has a lot of great insights that are worth sharing. If you're new to this channel, each week we take the upcoming weekend's lectionary reading from the Gospels and we have a discussion about those readings in the context of love and inclusion and social justice. Our hope is that our talking will be just talking, as in justice, but that also something will be said during this time as we go back and forth that will inspire you, along with us, to do more in our justice work than just talking. So, Alicia, our passage this week is Luke 16, 1 through 13, parable of the dishonest manager. Any initial comments?
Yeah, at no phase and stage in my life have I ever thought that I understood this parable.
Yeah, I think that's fair because
Uh-huh.
as I was looking at doing a survey of all the different interpretations that are out there, and I don't mean all of them, just quite a few of them, everybody, and I mean everybody, has a different take on this parable. And the injustice of it, writing the debt in half and canceling it and all that stuff. Everybody has a different interpretation.
Hmm.
Everybody. So I think it's fair to say that you and I aren't going to solve. We aren't going to give any interpretive certitude in this short conversation, right? But maybe we can come up with some ideas. Maybe we can come up with some way of interpreting it. One of my something I really buy into is
Hmm.
looking at the text through the lens of not coming up with the right interpretation, but coming up with a life giving interpretation.
Yeah,
And if it's life giving, then we're good. And if you bump into tomorrow a more life giving interpretation, then, jettison the first one and embrace the next one. Or if they're not contradictory, embrace them both. The point is to however we interpret our sacred text, to do it in a life giving way. Do you
yeah.
have any ways of interpreting this passage that have been favorites for you? Any insights in the past? Did you ever
Uh,
preach on this passage when you were a pastor?
well, see, I never had to follow the lectionary, so no.
Okay.
That's the good thing about the lectionary, right? Is it like forces you to wrestle with things that you don't understand. I didn't
so you
understand it, so I just never. Um,
No, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I've just read it and been like, I don't understand who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, what's the point? And even when Jesus explains the point, I'm still left, um,
Scratching your head.
I'm still left scratching my head. You know what it actually seems like is almost something you would see Machiavelli talk about instead of
Explain that.
Jesus,
Unpack that for me.
because it just everyone just seems to behave in such self-serving ways.
Mm,
You
mm.
know, so um, Jesus tells a lot of parables about like stewards, and the stewards are always supposed to be like responsible with what they've been given, right? And sometimes those can actually be a little disturbing because it's like they're not necessarily treated very well by the master. Sometimes the stewards are actually doing horrible things to the master too. There's one where they kill his servants and then his son. But yeah, so that, like there's a lot of those stories like God is usually the steward, and I don't know that that doesn't really even make sense in this. So I just
Right, right, right.
it doesn't make any sense that that would be the
Yeah,
case
placing God
necessarily.
as the
So
placing God as the boss here that this guy's working for doesn't work.
no, it really
So
doesn't work.
one of the interpretations that I did run across was William Herzog's, and I'm a big fan of William Herzog. Let me just say that from the beginning. So my openness to hearing his interpretation, I'm sure, is biased, right? But he
Hmm.
wrote a book called uh, "Parables as Subversive Speech," And he had me at the word subversive. I was okay. So
Right.
what's this about? And then his subtitle is Jesus as Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And what he does is he looks at the parables through the lens of the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire in his book Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Hmm.
And what he does is that he says, I know that the Gospels and the early Christians used these parables to try to teach us things about God and Christianity and heaven and all these different things and what it means to be a good Christian. He says, but what if we look at the parables not as what the later gospel authors did with them, but what would Jesus have been using this parable for if Jesus was using these stories as pedagogy of the oppressed? In other
Hmm.
words, the steward is never God, or the boss is never God, and the steward is always someone stuck in a class warfare of classism,
Hmm.
and people that are powerless or disenfranchised have to use different tools to to um to survive. And these parables didn't teach us about God and all these other things, but rather about it wakes up his audience, the oppressed, to the injustice of the system they're trapped in, and inspires them to work for change. So they're more, it's literally pedagogy of the oppressed
Hmm.
rather than what's the Catholic term, catechism for doctrine or theology.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's educating the oppressed in the reality of the unjust system. It's pulling back the
Sure.
veil from the unjust system that they're
Hmm.
stuck in.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Which in our context this week is appealing to me, because you and I just said
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense when we try to theologize it,
And
right?
I'm not the only one who feels that way. Like I've had lots of conversations with people who are like, I don't, like it's not one that people really, it's widely difficult to understand.
Widely, and that's why I think there's so many different interpretations out there. What
Hmm.
Herzog says in his interpretation, looking at it as pedagogy of the oppressed, he says what it shows is this manager using the tools of the powerless, the things that were at his disposal to keep his
Right.
job. And the way that he does it is this guy's in trouble with the patron for squandering his riches or for not. We don't know. That's the accusation that's against him, is that he's squandering the boss's resources.
Hmm.
He says, get your things together. You're out of here. Give me an accounting. I want to see your books. So what he does, and baked into the system, is you would have the boss's part of the cost of the goods, the boss's profit, and then you would have in the price baked in whatever the fee was for the manager. You would have his cut, his graft in
Right.
there as well. And so what Herzog says is what he does is he goes in and he cuts out his graft in all of these bills. So it doesn't hurt the boss. He's only removing his portion. And the oil is 50%
Yeah.
because the oil was subject to becoming rancid. There was more fluidity in that. It was hard to track what the price of oil really was. Wheat was only 20% because wheat is less malleable, it's less manipulatable as
Hmm.
far as the price. And so anyway, he cuts out he brings them all in, cuts out his portion. They don't know anything about this. They just see their debt being reduced.
Hmm.
And now they owe him a favor. And when they come into public, then all of these fellow businessmen with the boss, they're grateful to him,
Right.
thinking he did this, right? They're grateful
Yeah.
to him for what a great discount. Yeah, we love doing business with you. And what the boss realizes is this is pretty slick, because what my manager has done to me is he's not cut out any of my profit. He's only removed his own profit, his
Yeah.
own graft portion, which has, and by doing that, he has put me in a state of goodwill with my fellow business partners, of
Hmm.
the people that I work with.
So
And
he
now,
doesn't want to tell everybody.
exactly,
Right.
if he says no, this is unjust, that you're fired, and the prices go back to the way they were. Well, what he does is reveals the injustice that's in the price, the
Right.
graft that's in the price, and
Right.
he loses all the goodwill of the discount these guys thought they had with him.
Yeah.
Or he can leave the price the way it is,
Yeah.
and this is the only way it makes sense to me that he would commend the manager for being shrewd and say that's pretty slick, is that he looks at
Hmm.
the manager, and what does the parable say? The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. In other
Yeah.
words, he can't fire the guy now because now
Hmm.
he's on the spot with all these other businessmen. What are you going to do? Fire him and put the prices back? No. And has he
Right.
really lost anything? Not really. The only
Yeah.
person lost here is the manager. He's the only one that's out anything.
Now this is interesting because now that I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Whether or not you go along with the idea that there was a whether or not you go along with the idea that part of it was the graft, I think it makes sense either way. Wherever that discount came from, I think it does make sense that it's like, okay, like let's say, which is probably the case, that this guy's the steward. He's not he's not the person who actually owns the accounts. So the person who owns
Right.
the accounts can probably cancel these contracts if he wants to.
Absolutely.
So the question is he going to? And if you're talking about a culture where the economics is very relational based, not transactional based like ours, right? Because these people live together and they
Mhm.
see each other all the time and their families are probably related in ways, and there's just like the connection and the way that the communities are integrated. It's much more probably based on like honor and role in the community. And so it's like going to be a scandal that's going to be reputation damaging and it's going to destroy so much goodwill, whatever the case may be, that, yeah, it is kind of like a shrewd thing to do to say, like, I'm going to kind of prioritize the relational component here and I'm going to think about how this kind of affects in a broader community sense
Playing the long
and
game.
play the long game. Yeah, and like it says, maybe I'll be received into someone else's house, and we're talking about how that could mean maybe I'll get a job somewhere else. So it's like if I create this so much goodwill in this community and put my boss in a situation where he can't really like let me go, so it's gonna like they're not gonna know that. I'm gonna find another place. Like I'm not gonna be out on the streets. Like I'm gonna if I which makes sense with what Jesus says later too, actually. This is starting to kind of make sense, Herb. What?
I'm
What?
telling you, I think Herzog's onto something because
Yeah,
he
yeah.
looks at it through the lens of justice and
Mm-hmm.
the oppressed
Yeah.
rather than our privileged, propertied, powerful positions that we see. The problem that I think, and I know this is probably going on a tangent from what you're about to say, but the problem is we read this parable through our own privileged social location today. And so
Mm-hmm.
what triggers us is, what? Our profits are being cut in half? You're cutting what people owe me? You're cutting that bill. We're
Yeah.
looking at it from the wrong angle.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you look at it through the lens of the oppressed, you're like, ooh, what a slick manager. He found a way to turn the system around and
And we
preserve.
know that even when Jesus was speaking to wealthy people, he wasn't speaking to them through the lens of their own interests.
Exactly.
Like when he talks to them, that's not what he's doing consistently. And he is
Right.
consistently addressing in a positive way the poor and the marginalized and just like the people who weren't in positions of standing, just the general people in society, the crowds,
Mhm.
the masses kind of thing. So it totally makes sense that he wouldn't be being like giving advice to the wealthy on how to manage their money, but giving advice to his audience, who's
To the oppressed
consistently
on how
his
to
audience.
survive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not like there was a thriving middle class at this point in time. So yeah, so we're talking about like there's the wealthy and maybe the ultra wealthy, and then there's the like people who are subsistence farmers essentially and have very,
Mhm.
very few resources. And those were his audience. People who were just very vulnerable to changes in the weather, to changes in the politics and things like that. And it's like, how do you kind of survive day to day when your life is dependent on the whims of this wealthy person?
And
It
you can
makes a lot of
imagine
sense.
these
Mhm.
impoverished audience
Yeah.
cheering the manager on, saying, "Yeah, way to go!" That was, they kind of revel in it.
Yeah. I think something that, so I think it also additionally makes sense in terms of what Jesus said later as explanation. of the parable. And he said, let's see, he says in verse 13, no one can serve two masters, for he'll hate the one and he'll love the other. He will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. So I was actually thinking about another spot. It was, where did it go? If you have, should probably edit this part out.
You're good. This is part of the discussion.
There it is, chapter 9. But I think that other part is interesting too, and we should talk about it later. But verse 9, it says, and I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous mammon, so that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal habitations. So, like, basically, if you're using money in a way that, like, makes you a positive part of your community, then it doesn't say if, it says when it fails, when the money fails. They'll receive you into eternal habitations. Like, there's always going to be a place for you. If you
Yes.
if you use your money in a way that serves your community well, there's always going to be a place for you.
I'm going to go through a circuitous route to say
Yeah.
exactly what you just did. James Robinson, in his book, The Gospel of Jesus, Search for the Original Good News, he talks about how in an hyper individualistic economic society,
Mm-hmm.
our hope for the future is being able to pull up on our own bootstraps
Right.
when we're down, right? And so what we
Mm-hmm.
do is we end up hoarding resources
Yeah.
for that future rainy day, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what Jesus was saying is no, liquidate your resources today for those that have needs today
Mm-hmm.
to create a community that has your back,
Mm-hmm.
because it's way more secure to be going through this life as a community than as an individual.
Right.
And so therefore, basically, I'm helping someone else out today who's in need with my resources,
Yes.
with the hope that I'm investing in this community, knowing that if I run on hard times in the future, I've got people in this community that are going to do the same thing for me
Yeah.
then.
And
And
I
that's
think so many of us crave that in Western society
mm-hmm.
and have
What
such
we
a
see
hard
in the
time
book of
finding it.
Acts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
one of those parables that sets up Luke's themes of liquidating your superfluous assets and giving
Yeah.
that to the poor. And they eliminated poverty in Acts chapter 4, it says, in the early church. And so I think that's really what this is saying, is that they, using that dishonest wealth to
Mm-hmm.
create that community, these
Mm-hmm.
eternal.
Yeah.
My translation says eternal homes. What did your translation say? Because I liked yours better. Dwellings.
Habitations.
Habitations.
Yes.
Habitations. Yeah, it's
Yes.
community. Habitation is
Uh-huh.
community.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Home makes us think of gated community. No,
Right.
habitation is a community that we dwell in.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's like, in that time, people weren't living in single family homes.
Exactly.
They were living with other families or in larger homes that was of a wealthier person, or they like had a home business they were running out of their home, which actually has been the way it's worked through most of time until the Industrial Revolution. People were mostly like making things in their homes and selling
Mm-hmm.
them. So
Mm-hmm.
work from home is not like a new concept.
No, it's not as novel as COVID makes us think.
It's actually the way humans have lived for most of history. So, which makes sense. You actually get to see your family more. But anyway, now I'm on a tangent. Um, yeah.
But I think
So
this parable takes on whole new meaning when
yeah,
we look at it through the lens of the oppressed, the
and
life
then
that they would have lived and what they would have heard.
no, I completely agree with you. Actually, this is really exciting for me because I guess I gave up hope that I would ever understand this parable, and I am feeling a lot more confident about it now. As I even think about more things, when you think about in the Bible, if you want to be actually like really true to the teachings of the Bible, charging interest is
Right.
not okay. It's like not an okay thing to do. There's like maybe limited circumstances where maybe you can do it, but it's kind of like frowned upon. But the interest rates back in these days were not like what you would have now in like a security backed mortgage or something like that. They were incredibly high interest rates.
Oh,
Like,
incredibly predatory.
yeah, I mean, it would be more like the predatory loans of today and paycheck loans and things like that, where if you get behind, it's just like it rolls behind you and you just like you can't really catch up to it so easily. So it could be like these are people who have outstanding accounts. So are they being charged interest in
Hmm.
this? And
Hmm.
if they are, um,
It's
does he
kind of a
really want it to
Jubilee
go
moment.
public
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
he's charging these really high interest rates to all
Right.
these people? Is that something that he wants his community to know about? You know, if they all get wiped out at once, there must, it must have been a little bit on the
It,
DL kind of thing, you
it
know?
really pits the manager
Mm-hmm.
against the boss,
Mm-hmm.
because
It's very clever.
if he fires the manager,
Mm-hmm.
then what he's showing is that this part that was taken away was
Mm-hmm.
disposable. It
Yeah.
was extra for whatever reason, whether it was graft
Yeah.
or interest, or it was just extra.
Mm-hmm.
It
It,
was
it
cream
could
on the top.
be
Yeah. That
there
he could.
was there was money in the bank for that.
Right, right. There was some cushion.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, yeah, yeah. He's betraying the injustice of the system. It's actually another, to reference other herb places. It's another example of non-violent resistance,
Yep.
where he's using the tools at his disposal to
Mm-hmm.
unmask the system and
Mm-hmm.
put the elites in a
Mm-hmm.
quandary where there's now leverage. How does the oppressed
Yeah.
leverage things against the oppressors, which are more power? How do
Yeah.
the powerless leverage the powerful
To reveal the
in order,
system.
yeah, and to survive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no
Very
wonder he
much.
says, be like this.
Huh. Yeah.
It makes way more sense to me like this.
Oh, it does. It does. It actually makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I've thought about a lot, and I think gives us a lot of blind spots within Christianity, is when you think about historical context. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament were written by people who were um, under the thumb of empire. They were vulnerable to much more powerful empires, sometimes actually occupied by those empires, and sometimes just vulnerably caught in between, like in between Babylon and Egypt. And so it's like you're talking about people who are very vulnerable, who are economically disadvantaged, who do not have the stability that comes with being part of the empire that is the
Mm,
most powerful organization. That is the context in which all the Bible was written. The whole
mm,
thing, every
mm.
single word, every single page. And yet it has historically, since about 400 years in, been interpreted consistently in the lens of the empire.
Yes, yes,
The
yes.
very empire that was in the New Testament oppressing the writers of the New Testament. So that
No
was a
wonder
very
then
short window. Yeah, no wonder we have such a hard time coming up with these interpretations and
we
they feel
bump into this parable.
radical.
We're like, what do you mean by that?
Hmm.
What's he even saying? We come
Yeah,
up
yeah,
with a
yeah.
million different options,
Hmm.
and nobody knows because we're interpreting it from a person who's privileged within the empire.
And not just that, it's like 16, 1700 years of this interpretation.
Right.
There was only like a 350-year period where that interpretation was actually the people who were marginalized and oppressed.
Correct.
It's a
Correct.
very short period of time. And that was way
Where
at the beginning.
Christianity itself stepped into a different social location.
Exactly. Christianity itself. And so the people you think about as interpreters of the Bible are people who were in we're not experiencing that kind of vulnerability and instability. So whether
It's
you're talking
already too
about,
late. It's
mhm,
already too late by the time the Gospels are even being written down. I
mhm,
mean, even by the time Luke is being written, the
yeah,
very fact that we went from an oral community of illiterate, impoverished people to
yeah,
now
yeah,
there being wealthy people who could read, who
hmm,
could write, who wanted it written in Greek rather than Aramaic. And I know it's, street Greek. I get all that stuff, but still the fact that it's
Not
being
all of it.
down,
Not Luke.
right. And the fact that it's being written down,
Mm-hmm.
that already whispers to us that there's been a social location change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you're already
Yeah,
getting,
that's
even the interpretation that Luke puts on this parable is already getting away from the original interpretation of this story that
oh, it's
Jesus
already a different
intended.
audience.
It already is.
No, that's very true. That's very true. That's an interesting thing to think about. Yeah, I think it's really helpful to keep in mind as we try to understand these things, like how they were written, why they were written, and why we might have a hard time with some of them and blind spots and things like that. Yeah,
And
and
I walk away. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
we definitely know part of Paul's audience was very wealthy.
Right.
And you can see in his writings the tension of trying to balance those things as somebody who is trying to like spread a message and build a community, and like get people to join it and contribute to it, and clearly wanted the wealthy people to feel like they were there. There's
Right.
no, he's
Paul
very
would say, use your wealth for the kingdom. Jesus would be like, give your wealth to the poor and join the kingdom.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Paul would be like, in your use of your wealth to the
Right.
people who you are enslaving, like be kind to them and treat them well and justly, and don't beat them when you're not supposed to beat them.
Right.
But
And
like, this is something that the Southern slaveholders pointed out all the time,
yeah.
which is that
Yeah.
Paul had slaveholders in his audience and he never reprimanded them. And when you write what he wrote to Onesimus, there was no hint in there of it's wrong to enslave someone. It was the assumption was it's not wrong of you to do this, but this man is really useful for the gospel, so you should forgive him and you should release him for the sake of the gospel. So like, yeah, it's a very different kind of a tone, and I think reckoning with that is something that Christians haven't done, and makes it really difficult for them to apply the scriptures today. It makes
Yeah.
it very easy for
Yeah.
them to be like, we just take the morality and we import it now, like one-to-one correlation, like find the right text and look it up. Like it makes the failure to reckon with or even read what people who were apologists for slavery wrote. And I mean, if you take side by side, and I've done this, people who wrote wanting to say the Bible supports slavery and looking at it from that frame in a like the Bible is plain, the word is plain, take it at its word, anyone can understand it kind of mentality that they had. And you compare that with like maybe the one concerted attempt, I'd have to look up who it was and his name, I don't recall off the top of my head, but I've read what he wrote about trying to prove biblically that slavery was wrong. It's like, oh no.
Oh, and I am so glad you're bringing this up, Alicia, because you promised me 4
Mhm.
episodes.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
4th episode coming
Mhm.
up in the lectionary, I don't know if you've looked ahead that far or not, but I was
Mm-mm.
looking at it today. It's the worst passage in all 4 gospels affirming the use of slavery.
Oh, I can't wait. I've studied this
And
subject so much.
I
Yeah.
thought you and I have both read and discussed Mark Knoll's book, Civil
Mm-hmm.
Wars, Theological Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And we've looked at the way that abolitionists struggle with the scriptures, the same way that those who affirm LGBTQ people, wrestle with the scriptures to come up with affirmation there, and those
Yep.
types of different the just challenges where one interpretation, the abolitionist and the affirmation, it has to be more nuanced and it has to be more contextual, and you have to do more wrestling with the text to show what it's really saying. But it's the same dynamic that's taking place.
Well, actually, what shocked me when I started reading like people like William Wilberforce or people who were abolitionists, other than that one book, which he didn't try that again, he kind of tried a different tact after that. Other than that one book, it was like they didn't even try.
They
They
stopped
didn't.
trying to defend it from scripture.
No, well, they did, but they defended it based on the principles of the
Mm,
scripture and the character
mm,
of God.
Mm,
That's
interesting.
what they defended
Boy,
abolition on
that sounds
consistently.
awfully familiar. That sounds awfully familiar.
Uh, no,
So,
consistently. Like, okay, here's like William Wilberforce, right? Who everyone says like, yeah, this is the example of Christianity at the time. This was way before liberation theology. He actually says basically liberation theology, like pretty on the nose. I like God has a preferential option for the oppressed. Like he basically said that. He might have even used the word preferential. I have to look up the like this is how he thought. He thought like God is really mostly concerned with the people who are suffering. That's how he thought. Hmm.
totally. That's like pre-liberation theology.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the apologists of slavery were like, if we if we accept abolition, then we are undermining the authority of the scripture, and
Right.
Christianity will fall apart because we are not respecting the authority of the scripture. Like they said this over and over again, and abolitionists aligned themselves with agnostic people, deists, atheists, secularists, because those people were much more like a lot of them were in favor of abolition, and so they aligned themselves a lot, like Christian abolitionists aligned themselves a lot with those people. And then the apologists of slavery in the South would be like, see, it's like secular, it's not
Hmm.
Christian, like it
Hmm.
was just like, yes,
They would lose the
what?
culture war of their day.
That's 100% it. Hmm.
So I know we're stealing away from 2 episodes from now, but
Yeah.
Moses Stewart, who was Andover Seminary in Massachusetts, he was
Hmm.
widely recognized as the nation's most learned biblical scholar in the years leading up to the Civil War. And he wrote a book called Conscience and Constitution, in which he said that the abolitionist, in order to remain an abolitionist, to be
Hmm.
anti slavery, they must give up New Testament authority, give up the authority of
Hmm.
Scripture,
Yeah.
or abandon the fiery course that they're pursuing.
Yep.
So, yeah.
They said that over and over and over again. That's not like a tiny quote you pulled out of nowhere. Like that was
No, no,
repeated
no, no,
over and
no.
over and
That's,
over.
yeah, that's, you can't be a Christian and be an abolitionist.
They probably said that as often as people say love the sin or hate the sin.
I mean, it's so, I don't, I really want to save something for two
Yeah, we
episodes.
know there's plenty to say,
I,
but yeah, no. I mean, this just makes sense.
isn't it just the same thing? It's the same arguments today.
Yeah. I heard a really incredible sermon one time. It was basically she was saying the frame that you come with the scripture to the scripture to from the beginning impacts the way you see all of it.
Oh yeah.
And when you come to it from the beginning with the frame, like God's going to reward the good people who follow the right rules and who become God's people and who like and those people are going to be rewarded because they're the right kinds of people because they're moral and good. And when you come to it with that frame, and then you look at Genesis and the first 2 chapters of the Bible, and you think this is God telling us what's moral and good, and then you go on from there and you see the entire Bible through that lens. But what if like you got that lens wrong in the first place?
Yeah. What if you
And
started off?
instead, you start at the beginning and you're thinking, this is like God wanting to create this society of mutual love, support, and care. And then, like, where no
Rooted
one
in
gets left
empathy.
out, rooted in empathy, where no one gets left out. And then you read the Bible through that lens, and it makes sense. Like, I think more sense. So then Genesis, instead of like, this is what you should do, it's like, oh, Adam and Eve, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Like, this is the original family. Like, oh, we all belong to one another.
Mm, mm,
This is
mm,
one human family. This isn't tribe against tribe. Like, we have the
mm.
same parents. We're all bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Like, we are all from the same place. You
Yeah.
know,
Isn't
like,
this the fast that I've chosen? Isaiah 55, that you turn your eyes not away from your own flesh.
hmm, brilliant. Exactly. And then you look through the Hebrew Bible, and you see this like greater call to inclusion constantly expanding to like outside of Israel, to like freeing slaves. Like when you see it this way, and you see like condemnation of this kind of attitude of like we're going to be the most powerful, and you see the prophets, and you see all these things, and it's just like it's a completely different lens,
Mm-hmm.
but it makes complete and total sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, having seen the Bible through both lenses and tried to live my life in that way, it is very clear to me like which lens is consistent with the teachings of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And as
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about, there are discussions and dialogues in the text about like, well, maybe this way and maybe this way, which is why Hebrew people tend to like have a lot of different ideas about the text, because there's a wrestling with it that's like beautiful and wonderful, in my opinion. And then like Jesus comes along and like kind of takes sides in a fairly decisive way, like many times. Like there's times when he'll quote a text and he'll leave part of it off.
Mm-hmm.
And like in Luke chapter 4, that kind of seminal text where
Right, right,
Jesus,
right.
he leaves
Getting
out the
off the
part about
vengeance.
vengeance to the
Mm-hmm.
Gentiles. He just like stops, and that's why the people got so angry, because they didn't want to leave out the part about vengeance to the Gentiles. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, it's just really, it's really interesting to me, and it makes a lot of sense to me coming to the text with that frame. What doesn't make sense to me is pretending like I'm not coming to the text with a frame,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and pretending like I'm just like the
That you have
objective
some objective
interpreter
theology. Yeah.
of the text. Like to me, I hear somebody talking like that, and I'm like, well, they're selling me something, or they're finding their sense of belonging in this, or I don't know. It's just I'm
I was
kind of
sitting on a
suspect.
panel once in a
Hmm.
discussion in a forum, and beside me was well known to both you and I, a seminary professor that I will not name his name, but he was sitting beside me. And as I was quoting Black liberation theologians and womanist liberation theologians and feminist liberation theologians and queer liberationist theologians, he had the audacity to stop me in mid sentence and say to the entire room, to me in front of the entire room, the problem with those theologies is that they are biased in the experience of the people who are creating those theologies. They're rooted in their experience. It's not an objective way of reading the scriptures. And I looked at him in that very moment and I said, listen, dude, I think I even said, dude, which was disrespectful, but I was upset. I said,
That's a
you're
southern
white.
reason of like, that's a southern version of super angry, it sounds like to me, like having, like that's like I could see like yeah, anyway.
You're white. You're straight. You're a male. You're cisgender, and you're in power. You're the one that gets to call your theology just theology with no adjectives, but yours is just as much biased as the way you experience life
Yeah.
as anyone else's. The question is not, and I return to what we said at the very beginning tonight. The question is not, is this the one true interpretation?
Hmm.
Is my interpretation of this passage life giving? And if I bump into a community for whom my interpretation is death dealing, then it's time to find a new interpretation. Because all of us come to the scriptures with a certain lens, with a certain bias. And it's important that we surround ourselves with a community that is diverse enough that we hear from those whose experiences on this planet are not like our own, so that we can collectively come to a life giving way of understanding our sacred text.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that is really challenging, I think, for a lot of people who are very used to thinking of themselves as viewing the text objectively and
Right. Nobody
sacrificing
does.
for, and yeah, I think that's requiring, frankly, a level of like humility to kind of open yourself up to a perspective from people who are like not people you're used to seeing in positions of power in academia, and like opening yourself up to that perspective requires, I think, sadly, a degree of humility that actually I think is kind of rare. But it's like,
Mhm. It is the path towards the future.
well,
I'm not saying it's
how
the path we're
much
on. I'm not saying
are
it's the path we're on.
right, right, like the like arc of history, right?
If
That
we're,
that
well,
future,
I'm saying if we're not
like,
going to destroy ourselves.
yeah, if we have a future.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, no, I think that that's fair. But like one of the things to me that's really sobering. So getting back to like people who were apologists for slavery, they thought that they were defending Christianity and the Bible. They were not. People do not look at the Christian defense of slavery and think Christianity must be a good religion.
Exactly.
Like they they don't. They were wrong about that. And that's not the first time. Christianity has been wrong about women because historically Christianity has taught that women are morally inferior. Like the whole, like, I don't know, the catchphrase now is like this is that the gender, like it's different roles, not different values.
Right,
That is
right, right.
not the historical teaching of Christianity. I could show you the quotes. That is not the historical teaching of Christianity. Is that women are
Are
intellectually
inferior
and morally inferior and should never. And this is the roles are different because
because of the inferiority.
the nature of the individuals is different. Like the roles aren't based on some arbitrary thing that means nothing. Like it's based on a differential morality and capacity. And men had to make the decisions because they were the ones who were intelligent. You would never trust a woman to a decision. Come on, what if women don't know anything? They might be able to run a household on a good day, but you know what I mean? People are like, "Oh, I believe in traditional gender roles." And that's not that's not like sexist, and it's just different roles, not different value.
No,
I
it's
do
rooted
believe
in
in
a history
equality.
of sexism and misogyny.
Yeah, and what they don't know is like if you were to take that person and put them next to Tertullian or Augustine or Calvin or any of these people and what they taught, and then put this like modern conservative complementarian, like the complementarian is like way closer to a modern feminist
Right,
than to
right,
Tertullian or
right.
Augustine or Calvin by
It's
a
almost as if you
million
want to.
miles.
It's
By a
almost as if you want to say, "Hey, you're almost there. Just take one more step over the line. Just one
well,
more step."
oh yeah, so maybe if there's equality in person, there could be equality in roles based on like individual characteristics. But anyway, so like these arguments have been had in the past. You know, they used to believe that God installed kings and lords, and so you owed like those people had a divine right to rule because God had
Mhm.
put them in the right to rule, and so it was authoritarianism is what it was.
So what you're telling me is that Christianity has been wrong about slavery.
Hmm.
Christianity has been wrong about women.
Hmm.
Christianity has been wrong about economics. Christianity has been wrong about governance as
Hmm.
far as authoritarianism.
Hmm.
Could Christianity, well, I won't say could, is. So Christianity is wrong also about things that we're wrestling with in our culture war today.
So I'm going to frame it a little different.
Okay.
I would say Christendom, Christianity as political power, as
Okay.
the
Okay.
reinforcing power of the status
I
quo.
see your love for Christianity and you're wanting to hedge and you're wanting to protect it. I get it.
Well,
I get it.
well, I think it's actually useful because I want to go
Okay.
back to what I said about the text and the frame that you use for the text. Because it depends on the frame that you're using for the text. Because there were always people, like Galileo was a devout Christian,
Right.
right? So there have always been people, and maybe this is very much like my Adventist heritage. It's almost like a different view of some of us. Anyways, but there's always been people within Christianity who respected the text, who looked at the text and said, it's more than just about these specific words in these specific texts about these specific subjects, where it says God sets up rulers and authorities and you need to submit to them. It's about more than that, they would say. It's about the broader themes of the text and the scriptures, and you have to look at the whole thing, and you have to understand the character of God, and you have to have it with love and compassion and care for the oppressed and working towards a better world. They've seen it through that second frame where they began with the story differently. And those voices have always been in Christianity and have constantly come into, and often aligned with others who are outside of Christianity, right? Often aligned with humanists and secularists, or whatever that was of the age. Always gotten into these conflicts with Christendom and with the powerful forces and those forces in Christianity who wanted to focus on the text. And they said, no, it says slaves submit to your masters as to the Lord. And it says this, and it says this. The group of people who wanted to focus on the character of God and who wanted to focus on love and compassion and has always gotten it right every time. And the group of people who wanted to focus on, but this text, but that text, but that's text. Historically, we look back on that and we say they were importing the cultural ideas instead of the actual values of Scripture. We have to understand it in context. Now we look back and we say that on those subjects. The group that has always been right has been the group that has looked at the teachings of the prophets, looked at the teachings of Jesus, looked at the concept of God as love and the expansion to all people, and made those arguments. Like when you look historically, those people have literally been right every time. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I would go one step further.
Go a step further. Let's hear it.
And just say that that's not just outside of the text. That there's also authors within the collection of our sacred text that are in those same two camps. So that it's not always just a matter of interpretation, like an interpretive lens, but there are actually some people writing the text from the wrong lens as well.
Yeah, give me some examples of that. No, I'm not. Yeah, I want to hear it. Let's talk about it. Give it to us.
No. Well, we're stealing away from 2 weeks from now.
Oh, shoot. One of them is Leviticus 25. Maybe we should just say, we'll pin that.
Okay.
If you want to follow
Leviticus 25
later,
says,
we're going to talk about that.
You can have slaves. You can even keep them as your property and pass them on to your children. That's fine. Just do it of the nations around you, not your fellow Israelites. So they recognized that slavery was wrong enough to say, don't do it to each other.
Well, they wanted their slavery to be race-based.
But do it to, yeah.
And there's a long justification.
That's not an interpretation. That's not an interpretation. That's an example of
literally
baked into the text.
It's the Canaanites, and it goes back to Noah, prophesying that Ham's descendants are going to be enslaved.
Right.
That's the first time the Bible talks about slavery.
There are passages where the Bible teaches racism. I mean, that's an unpopular opinion, but that's not just an interpretive lens. That's where you have to have a different interpretive lens to say, whoa, that passage is not compassionate. It's not just. It's not, it's not humane. And you're not rejecting an interpretation there. You're actually saying that's a passage that I'm going to put on the shelf and say that's not a life-giving passage.
Yeah. And what I would like to see is somebody who says, no, that's not right. Like, that's not how Scripture is. That's not all Scripture is,
Yeah, I'm not in an narrative.
Good. But I would just like to see somebody like take the concept of how biblical case beginning in Genesis chapter 9, building the case that Canaanites deserved their ethnic enslavement.
Right.
Like
and
building
genocide.
the case steadily.
And genocide.
Yes. Building the case steadily that this was deserved. I would just like to see that kind of taken seriously by someone who is saying, no, there is not this discussion in Scripture.
Right.
Like, I think what I see more often is two things. One is just a like emotional, angry reaction. How dare you?
Mm-hmm.
Or the other is just like completely ignoring that, just like refusing to entertain that
Yeah,
question.
I don't know what to do with that, so I'm not even going to think about it.
And that is so aggravating for me as part of the LGBTQ community because it's like, well, we can't just ignore these texts. What are you talking about? You ignore so
There's
many
plenty
texts.
of texts we ignore.
Yeah, you ignore so many texts. Tell me when you did a Bible study trying to figure out whether slavery was right or wrong. Or did you just assume that it was and ignore the texts that are uncomfortable to you?
Right.
Like, I don't know. It's now I'm soapboxing.
I love it. You got it. We're gonna have so much fun 2 weeks. We're gonna have fun next week, but 2 weeks from now, man, fasten your seatbelts. That's gonna be a great conversation. You got any closing thoughts on the dishonest manager this week, Alicia?
No, this was like so helpful to me, actually. I really like it. Hmm.
I have to confess to all of you that when Alicia and I spoke behind closed doors, I told her that Todd and I used to only talk for like a half an hour. So I don't, I'm
Shoot.
only asking for a half an hour of your commitment. And I sold her on this idea that it would only take up a half an hour of her life. But man, when we get to talking, there's just, you can't keep it all in a half an hour. So Alicia, I appreciate you. That's what I'm trying to say. I
I
appreciate you.
appreciate you too, Herb.
And if we're taking up too much time, I humbly apologize. I know you have a life you have to get back to. Again, any
I don't
closing
know.
thoughts on this? Any gems of wisdom you want to sign off with tonight? Anything at the end?
No, this has been really helpful. I've really appreciated your perspective in talking about this. It's been fun.
All right, tell us about your book.
Oh, yes, the Bible and LGBTQ Adventists. The last, the last chapter, basically the last chapter of which is and pretty much entirely about the slavery discussion and how we need to wrestle with the question of like, oh, if it was taught consistently in Scripture and that was the only way it was, and there was no other way, like, then don't we need to like stay consistent with Scripture? But Scripture was pretty consistent, unfortunately, about enslavement as well.
Yeah. And I was hinting at that if we've done this with slavery, if we've done this with women, if we've done this with democracy, if we've done this with economics, why can't we do it with LGBTQ affirmation? Which I'm sure that's where we're headed in 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So for all of you out there who are supporters of Renewed Heart Ministries, let me just quickly say thank you to you. Thank you for your support. We couldn't do it without you. If you would like to join them in supporting Renewed Heart Ministries, you can do that by going to renewedheartministries.com and clicking donate. My latest book also, Finding Jesus, a fundamentalist preacher discovers the socioeconomic and political teachings of the Gospels, is available too on Amazon. It's also on Audible in an audiobook format. Yeah, I think that's all I've got this week. Alicia, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being on this show. And I didn't take the time to look out what we're even talking about, what next weekend is, what their lectionary reading is for next week. But I'm sure it's going to be another thought-provoking discussion. So thank you so much, and tune in, everybody,
Sounds
next
good.
week at the same time, and we'll see you then.
Bye.